Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for being here today. I see a bunch of people filing in. It's one after the hour, and we've got a whole bunch to show you here. So I'm going to give it one more minute. There's my speakers, Paolo, George, and MJ. These are people you guys all of you in the audience probably recognize. Paolo and George have been on these before. MJ is our head of GRC here at Trustero. So we've got quite the wealth of expertise. And as I mentioned at the top, this webinar is going to move fast and furious, and I'm going to keep going. And if you have questions, please interact in the chat. You're all here to see some breakthroughs that we've uncovered. We've been doing a lot of cool things with Trustero and Trustero Intelligence specifically. These three with me today have, I think, probably triple my age just in GRC and audit and security expertise. They have a lot of stuff to share here. They're helping drive the product here at Trustero with that expertise, and they're also helping do some product discovery. We're finding out a lot of cool things that Trustero and Trustero Intelligence specifically can do that we didn't even think were possible. So that's what we're here to show you today. Some of those things that our experts here have discovered. So we've got George. He's our Chief Information Security Officer. MJ, I mentioned, our head of GRC here at Trustero, and Paolo's our head of internal audit, as well as I think 5 or 6 other hats that you wear here around the office. So, but anytime anyone in the audience sees anything they'd like to talk a little bit more about, we'll have these QR codes anywhere for you to scan, set up a meeting with us. There'll also be some resources throughout here that you can scan. We're going to jump right into it here instead of taking forever as I'm doing right now. The agenda, I just mentioned it to you. MJ is going to show you some things she discovered that has helped make her life easier. Paolo's going to do the same. He's done a lot of discovery for prospects and customers recently, and he's going to show you some of that. George has been speaking at a lot of conferences, and we just went through an audit, and he's got a lot of practical experience from his career and from just what we've gone through recently here at Trustero. If you follow along with our newsletter and our blog, you might have seen some posts recently. Those posts were a preview for this webinar. So if you want to follow that and follow along with some of the content that we're creating and some of the discoveries we're making within AI for GRC, you can sign up to receive that newsletter here. Paolo, MJ, and George rotate through that and provide a lot of good, interesting insights. So let's get right into it. MJ, you're here to talk to us about AI and GRC and set the stage for a lot of these tools that we have and some of these things that we're going to be showing today. So I'll hand it over to you here.
Thank you, Connor. Appreciate the intro and the handoff. Before we actually dive into the product, I want to set some upfront expectations. I know everybody on this call has heard a lot of hype about GRC. And the first thing we want to kind of do is set the foundation, what AI and GRC is and what it isn't. The way we at Trustero look at it, AI and GRC isn't about replacing subject matter experts. It's about making us more effective. Trustero Intelligence, which you're going to see a lot of, and I'm going to refer to it later as TI, it's not all-knowing. It's not smarter than any of us. It's only as smart as the content and structure that you have built into your actual GRC program. The analogy I like to compare it to is think of it like bringing on a new entry to mid-level analyst onto your team. Their intelligence or their knowledge depends on what you've given them: policies, risks, your controls, and actual vendor data, third-party risk management. With the right foundation, they're going to accelerate. They're going to be successful with your program and be able to amplify their impact, same as TI will.
Hey, MJ, real quick question I just had. So why can't just GPT-5 just came out and is incredible and has great reasoning. Why can't I just upload my knowledge base or repository of documents, policies, controls, and evidences to that and then have it reason through? You say AI and GRC is not all knowing, but if I give them all of my documents, doesn't that mean it's all knowing?
That's a good question. And that brings us back to actual context and guardrails. The main primary difference between Trustero here using our product with our TI feature and using ChatGPT, ChatGPT will reference and use uh, its intelligence, which is based on the large collection of data it has gathered on Google on the web. And we as GRC individuals and the individuals on this call, we understand the first thing we learn in the GRC space, even in finance space, InfoSec, privacy, all of those collectively, is we always want to go straight to the trusted source. There's so much information that exists that you can Google, and even outside of the GRC space, how
So,
do you
so,
know
so
what
those,
to trust?
yeah, so those tools, so that would essentially, it just means that it's too broad. It has too much information. Like, it has too many things to pull from, and we'll get confused. So it makes sense using that analogy as an entry to mid-level person, because they're only using knowledge from internal. And I think you were about to get there, but we wrote a white paper on this. You all can see the QR code on the screen. Paolo, George, MJ, as well as some other experts all contributed to this, really lays out what AI and GRC is and what it's not, and helps you set expectations when you're out there, looking for a new way to do GRC, which that's what AI is unlocking for all of us here, is just a new way of doing our jobs. So, right back to you, MJ.
Yeah, thank you. And would it really, just to kind of summarize the core difference ChatGPT and TI, Trustero Intelligence chat interface, is we'll actually put guardrails around it and limit what it's looking at and the collective intelligence it's using. And then the context, which is the next slide we're going to go to. The context itself is your GRC program, what you give it. So it's going to give you decisions and feedback based on your actual program that's already in place.
If I can jump here for a moment, MJ, because I've been hearing this question quite a bit. Why don't I just get ChatGPT or Gemini or Notebook LM and just load a whole bunch of my internal documents, and there you go. I have a GRC, AI GRC. Not really, because all of those tools that we are talking about, they're kind of a general AI. They haven't been trained on that subject, and you need an expert. So training is one piece, all the background information. The other one is how you ask the questions, because especially if you've been working with things like ChatGPT, there is a lot of back and forth until you get to the right prompt. And then there is also the guardrails that you need to have. Because yeah, everybody knows about hallucination, and those tools tends to hallucinate when when there is no consensus on the answer, or there is not enough information to come up with the answer. So there are special tricks and techniques that we use in order to reduce the level of hallucination. So
Yeah.
if you take, let's say, Notebook LM and load your policies, controls, and standards and everything there, and at some point get to, yeah, probably you'll be able to get close to been working on this now for so you have it off the shelf with all the technology. And by the way, we have some patented technology in the tool as well. So yeah, just there you try to, let's say you have ISO 27001, then you want to go to 853. Try to do it with ChatGPT. Yes, on a high level, it's going to give you pretty good answers. But once you start diving deeper, like specific questions, it's going to be all over the place.
Okay, thanks for that, George. And we'll jump back to MJ real quick.
If you're joining us today and you're in the GRC space, you're going to recognize this slide. And you've always had that moment when you feel like you're the helicopter, you can see the bridges out, nobody else can. And what I'm going to focus on next is show you how to set up in Trustero your GRC program so you can start executing on the TI threat assessment. Okay, just going back to the slide you just saw with the helicopter, as a lot of you already understand, your control is the heartbeat of your GRC program. It serves several dual purposes. If set up right, it is going to be connected to your risk entry to mitigate the risk. It's also going to be connected to your framework or applicable regulatory factors. And what you're currently going to look at is our control index page within the platform. You'll see the controls listed here, ID, names. These are just core security controls. And I'm going to switch over to IM01 unique user ID. A lot of you guys will be familiar with this one. It's the name, objective, required evidence. This is the test procedure AI has been trained to do. And with it being the heartbeat, this is something Trustero has been doing for a while, is doing operating effectiveness checks, doing the policy examinations, all the things that take a lot of time. And that's where it can be very confident in what it provides you as the actual results itself. So on this one, you can tell it's connected to the risk. We'll hop over into the risk page later on. And then here, it's also linked to the compliance frameworks you currently have. This can be ISO 27001, it can be NIST CSF, and then it goes down to the exact criteria that you can also select, or the clause, the actual control requirement itself. And then risks, we're going to hop, this is all the risk entries. You can see all the controls connected to here. We have vendor management. You have all your related risks as well. And this is one of the pieces I was excited to show. We've had it for a while. And I'm going to use the PS01 physical entry control as an example. As you guys already know, ISO 27001 has a statement of applicability, PCI, you have your control responsibility matrix. And the one thing we all know, you can't just set and forget a control. So one thing we have in control is the actual responsibility. So let's say we're a SaaS SMB organization. All our data is hosted in AWS. So we want to set this to inherited. And then we're going to select AWS, which you saw the vendor management page, third-party risk was already set up. And then we're going to provide an explanation in here, because if we set this up the right way, I'll copy and paste it into here, then this can be pulled out for your SOA for later, and vendors can see this. And this just provides a brief explanation. We're going to mark inherited. And then what you're going to have is it's set to inherited by. AI scan is not going to check this, but we can tell it's connected to a risk. And then now we have that one set up right. Next, let's go over to the actual risk register itself. This is a very interconnected way of having everything set up and ready for AI to do its magic as well. And then the TI playbook we're going to get into. You can see controls it's connected to. You have an inherent risk before you take any action. Your residual risk is after the connected controls are fully operationalized and operated effectively. That's the residual risk you have over. You can also check the status and then assign an actual internal owner. And then let's go down to the actual risk that was just connected to the PS01 control. For this one, you can see what it does is actually has the applicable threat or the name, predisposing condition, vulnerability, your asset at risk, impact to customer, and then your overall risk calculation scoring. Webinar on that later. And then it actually has the related vendors connected in here and your mitigating compensating controls. And then with this, vendors, that brings you full circle into vendor management or third-party risk. And then here you can see it allows you to set your risk tier level. You can track your SOC 2, your attestation, SOC 2, ISO 27001. Here you can see this one needs to be updated, owner needs to be assigned and gathered. And then it'll also show you at a glance whether the actual attestation is out of date or it's still okay.
Yeah, we've set the stage nicely there. We've got everything set up. We've got our vendors and our risks in there, and you set the stage nicely. So everyone, now what we're going to be talking about is how you're actually going to execute an action on this beautiful setup that MJ just put in there for us. And so, MJ, you wrote about this actually this week on the blog that I mentioned at the top. You wrote out exactly how this is going to work. So why don't you take it from here?
Thank you, Connor. And one of the things this really gives GR individuals is the flexibility to do things beyond having to have a button for it. And that's a lot of what I'm sure everybody's heard of with AI agentic workflows, the capabilities those are bringing us. So this is kind of a sneak peek into that. And the important thing, what I just kind of walked you through, those are all the dots or all the information of GRC program. It's all interconnected and ready to go. You're currently looking at our Trustero Intelligence page. You can see kind of the chat feature here. On the right, you actually get to set the context for it. As we already know, going back to my initial, when a entry to mid-level analyst starts, their intelligence or ability to know what good looks like is based on your actual GRC program in place. And a lot of times you have to guide them and teach them and point them to the actual right data to look at, because based on the data you look at is going to be a level of assurance you get for an actual response. So that's what this does. All the information it has access to that you've put into, the Trustero account.
Yeah, context that we keep finding here, context is king, right? Like everyone used to say the old adage, cash is king. Well, as we've seen, cash is going away. But now with AI, context is truly king. You need the right context to get the most out of these tools these days.
Thank you. And so with the threat intelligence playbook, what we're going to do is 5 different steps. And to summarize those, we're going to go in and extract scoping context that is going to influence our threat exposure. First, as an organization, we want it based on our actual environment. Then we're going to determine the applicable threat categories or scenarios. And you have the capability of using what you want. I'm going to be using a specific report and data that I trust. What we're going to do next, after we gather the applicable threats, we are going to compare these against our current risk register contents, the risk entry specifically. And then the last step, we're going to identify and flag any missing threats for user review or addition. And as you can imagine, that's a lot. That is days of work for one individual to make sure and capture all that information. With the TI threat assessment playbook and prompts, you can now do that in minutes. And here's one I already got started. And I'm going to walk you through this, but just to show you, because this is the exciting part, just to show you live how it does this, I'm going to get one started and then I'm going to flip back to here so we don't have to sit here and wait for it. So I'm going to go to here and I've got my prompt off to the side. I'm going to copy and paste it. Grab prompt 1.
So what you're doing right now is you're given the last step in this chain here, the last step in this threat assessment playbook. We're given to Trustero Intelligence here, and she's setting the right context for it. And while we walk through the work you did prior to this, Trustero Intelligence is going to be doing its job on the back end to provide you with the final output. So while we say, you go from days and weeks to hours and minutes, it's not instantaneous. It still takes, about 30 minutes. But MJ, how long would this have taken you before?
Days.
Days, a whole week, right? It's crazy how much time you're able to save now with these playbooks and Trustero Intelligence. So enough of my rambling. You guys can see Trustero Intelligence working right there. MJ, if you want to hop back while he's working, we can go through the rest of the threat assessment playbook and keep it moving, because I know Paolo and George are chomping at the bit over there to show what they've uncovered as well.
Thank you. And then this is prompt 1, what you just saw me copy and paste, and you can tell it to output in any format. Here you can see we're asking it to gather regulatory system scope context. It gave regulatory factors, primary information systems, supporting tools, all of our vendors. Prompt 2, I asked it to go gather organizational business context next. Here you can see, ta-da, it provided it. The next thing for prompt 3, I asked it to identify the applicable threats based on the organizational context. And then it successfully did that as well, where you can see, and I had the 2025 Cyber Edge threat report that I provided to it. And it has the threat category, threat name or type, brief description. The important thing is why it's relevant to us. Going back to context and guardrails, it understands our organization. You can see GitHub, you can see Google Workspace, TriNet, Atlassian. It's referencing the initial scope and the context that we told it, asked for it, and then told it to use. And then with prompt 4, we're going to compare these threats to our existing risk register entries. And we told it just the missing and partially covered, what it did, threat category, it fed it down from the prior prompt, threat name or type, and then it provided supporting notes. And you can tell the R0 IDs for the risk register. It's saying if it's not there, is it covered, already covered? All the notes are in there. Prompt 5, this is the last one. What we then did is said, okay, so these are the missing and partially covered ones. Now, please provide me an output so I can go and directly upload it into my risk register. And for this one, it did provide all the information. Sometimes you have to prompt it again. I said, hey, provide it in a table format. And then it gave me the last one again. So this is actually ready to upload into the risk register.
I'm really interested to see what that output that we loaded up there at the beginning. I've just been really waiting. So let's see how he did. How did he do, MJ?
It's perfect, just the way it's supposed to be.
That's awesome. That's really impressive. Thank you. So go ahead, MJ.
Then I'm going to hand it over to you, because a big thing with in the GRC space is everything isn't a spreadsheet as we gather information, put it together. One of the biggest thing here at Trustero that we did immediately is you saw that output. What we've made on every index page and all the information, so it's easy to export and add risk. And these are all .csv files. And I'm going to hand it right back to you, Connor.
Right on. Thank you. That threat assessment was awesome. And we're jumping right into, there's not going to be much of an intro, right into Paolo. Paolo's got a gap assessment, some issues management stuff to talk to you guys about. Again, he posted about this on our blog last week and the week before. So a little bit of a preview. Now he's going to dive in and show you what exactly it looks like in the product. Paolo, over to you, buddy.
Thank you, Connor. All right, so really quick overview on the Dora GAP assessment here, and I promise I won't do death by PowerPoint. So one of the common challenges with Dora, and it being a relatively new regulation here within the past couple of years, is that there's a lot of manual everything, right? And it takes a lot of time to essentially get what you need from it and determine how you can comply, and AI is the right answer for this one. And so you'll see on the bottom there, as far as estimated annual savings, i.e. the value proposition from multiple reputable sources, AI can help make this 3 times faster. It reduces the time spent to perform the gap assessment by 70%. And it also makes sure that you don't spend too much on traditional consulting. And so once we determine the gaps, the next part we would normally do is issue management. And I will bundle this two use case for you guys together here. So similar idea with regards to issues management. A lot of times it takes a lot of effort because we have multiple cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. So whenever we work with issues, we have multiple control owners involved, multiple subject matter experts that want to be part of the process. And so imagine if you have all your GRC information in a singular platform and everything is automated by AI with minimal input from subject matter experts. This will help, again, reduce duplicate issues. It helps provide 35 to 50% faster remediation process, and as well as making sure that there's less repeat findings or repeat issues in the future. And so from there, I want to show you guys how this looks like within Trustero. All right. So what you see here is our agentic questionnaire component within our AI service. And here we perform the Dora GAP assessment. I've enhanced it so that it focuses on the 5 pillars of Dora. And that results in about 146 requirements based on its core 5 pillars. And so you'll see here, out of 146, we were able to perform the gap assessment within about 21 minutes time. That is way more value added than what I could say for traditional consulting-led approaches, because normally when we perform gap assessments, consultants would take anywhere from about 40 hours at best to a few months to perform the gap assessment for you, and then provide the rationale why they're identifying gaps, and then wrap it up in a report. Here you have it all ready for you through our questionnaire agent, and you'll see that you have all the answers. So for example, question number 8, we're asking about how does our policies and controls meet the requirement for segregation of duties, right? And this is based on pillar number 1 of the Dora framework. And so it tells here, yes, your current accounts, policies, and controls meet this requirement because of this particular reason. More importantly, and what is unique with Trustero is we make sure we cite our sources so that you know that you can rely and depend on our AI. And what that means is, where did my AI get the answer? Where did the answer come from? In this case, the AI looked at your policy, and it also looked at your HR1 segregation of duties control. Very appropriately done. And for this one question, this one requirement, it took the AI about 12 seconds.
12
The
seconds.
other
How long? You weren't prepared for this. If I asked you that question,
Yeah.
how long would it take for your brain to process it, think about it, and then figure out what you're going to say? More than 12 seconds?
Way more than 12 seconds. If I were to put my consulting hat on, and I did work for the likes of RSM, Grant Thornton, Deloitte in the past, and this one would take us, I would say, at least a couple hours at best, because we need to gather requirements, we need to talk to stakeholders, we need to perform walkthroughs, and so on and so forth. You see, it gets very tedious. It gets very daunting pretty quickly. And here, with the assistance of AI, it took us 12 seconds.
And one question that just came in the chat for you, Paolo. Will the tool give feedback for the assessment on the areas where some of the analysis can't be answered? I noticed as you were scrolling, there was a couple no's in there, or I don't knows, which is something that our AI does as well. So are you able to get feedback on some of those, or how does that work?
Yes, absolutely. So I was able to just show you what yes looks like. And here now in screen, I'm showing you what no looks like. So TLDR of this one, essentially, if the AI determines that your policies and controls do not match or do not meet a particular requirement or criteria within Dora, then it will tell you flat out no, and the reason why it's saying no. As far as feedback is concerned, yes, absolutely. You can give the AI feedback. You can say, hey, I think your answer is incorrect here. I can just hit edit answer and then provide my subject matter expert answer. Again, the AI is not 100% accurate. In this case, we've only tested it to 95% accuracy, which I would say is respectable enough. But that's when we come in as subject matter experts in our field, as practitioners in our field. We can say, yes, you might have ascertained this, but AI, we can do better. And here's the right answer. So you can edit that, hit save, and then accept the answer. And then the AI will take that, so that anytime this similar question gets asked again in the future, the AI will know how to answer it better.
Cool.
Yeah, and
Thank
Paolo,
you.
this is
And
probably something we need to emphasize, that it learns from your answers. So when you change, when the AI comes with an answer and you change that answer, then
Yes.
it will take that feedback, and next
absolutely.
time it's going to answer properly. And one other thing that I would like to highlight here, that you're actually excellent, you're showing this thing. You have three possible answers.
Mhm.
Yes, it meets the criteria. No, it doesn't meet the criteria, or I don't know. So the AI is very clear. It's not going to hallucinate. I mean, if it doesn't know, it doesn't know. If it cannot find the information, it will say, I don't know, which is different than you don't meet or you meet the criteria.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you, George. All
Hey,
right. So
Connor, I
Yeah,
want to
MJ.
make sure that the audience understands what is being demonstrated here, because I'm going to double click. Elizabeth had a good question, because a big part of doing assessments is if you catch a gap, we want to know why it was wrong or what's the corrective action to be taken. So what Paolo shared with you guys and did a good walkthrough of is just questionnaire. It's not the depth at the control, that's a heartbeat. So earlier you saw policy examination where it does that, and you saw operative effectiveness check. This is just a sub part of that. In both policy examination and operating effectiveness check, it actually tells you exactly what it found, and it gives you a corrective action recommendation based on what it found. So that was just important to notate.
Yeah, thanks, MJ. And Paolo, right back to you to go over some of this gap remediation so we can get over to issues management.
thank you. And just to connect the two together, we've determined that we have gaps within Dora, and we know now the nature of those gaps. We can connect it directly into Trustero Intelligence now, which you've seen quite a few times now at this point in the webinar, and say, hey, AI, what is Dora? The Dora requirement regards to operational resilience testing, right? Pillar number 3. And it very accurately describes what that is based on the context that I was able to provide. So this context, the evidence that I've uploaded, is essentially the control matrix as well as the explanation for what Dora is and how it is done based on how it was defined by the regulators. So again, in order for the AI to be successful, and as MJ mentioned earlier as well, you need to provide it with the right guardrails, the right context, and the right prompting. And see here, we're getting the right answers. And so to conclude on that, to remediate this issue, I therefore asked the AI now, hey, I currently have a gap with regards to this DORA requirement that talks about trend analysis to identify recurring weaknesses. As my AI analyst, can you provide me with some guidance on how to remediate this gap? And once again, the AI here in action was able to provide us some step-by-step recommendations on how to remediate it. It talks about making sure we have centralized tracking, proper data analytics, risk-based prioritization, and so on and so forth. And again, I know I've said this a lot of times, to prove that the AI does not simply hallucinate, it just tells you, okay, I got it from this particular evidence resource. Matter of fact, you also mentioned how to do this in your information security assurance policy. And this is how we're going to provide the tailor-fitted recommendation in order to resolve this issue that we found in our gap analysis. All right, and back to Connor.
Great. Thank you, Paolo. That was awesome. George, you're batting cleanup for us here. You've got the final say. So let's get into what you're going to talk about. I believe Conmon was something you were excited to talk about.
Yes. Okay, so I'll try to do it really quick. So 2 use cases I would like to show you. The first one is the continuous control monitoring. It's called also CCM. It's called Conmon for those that have been in the federal space. We all know that this is the gold standard. I mean, that's what we would like to do, continuously monitoring the controls. The moment we have an issue, control incident, we fix it rather than finding just before the audit or, God forbid, during the audit. The only reason we're not using it across the board, because it's very expensive. In fact, in my previous jobs, I have teams of 2-3 people that are doing just that because I had to do it. I had FedRAMP and I had to do it. So the question is, how do we address this thing with Trustero? I'm going to show you two cases. One is disaster recovery. So you know how you have to test your disaster recovery plans. And the second one is using a new feature that we recently introduced. It's called test tables. So let me jump right into it. This is the controls dashboard. So for each of those controls, we use AI to perform 3 checks. The first one is kind of the design effectiveness. In other words, whether the control objective meets the objective from the policy. Is the control well written? The second one is, do we have the right evidence for that control? As you know, you may have some really complex controls that pull information from multiple places. And the evidence here at Trustero, I think MJ talked a little bit about the receptors. That's how we pull evidence automatically from different platforms. Or people can submit the evidence manually. And very soon we're going to have another interesting feature in terms of gathering evidence. So this is whether we have the right evidence for the control. And the third one is the operative effectiveness check. So, okay, I have the control, matches the policy, I have the evidence. Does that evidence show that the control was operating properly? So the first control I picked to talk about, it is the data backup in disaster recovery. I'm not going to talk much about the interface over here because you've used GRC tools and the control objective, what is the evidence that I need to gather, what is the test procedure, how I test this control, and on the right-hand side, how that control maps to policy, framework, who is the owner of the control. This is just a regular housekeeping stuff. I have an artifact and how that artifact fits into the overall ecosystem. Now, the interesting part here is, okay, I have the evidence, as you can see here. It is a manually supplied evidence. And then how do we do the examination of the evidence? I can use AI to run on a schedule. So let's say once a quarter, once a month, once a week. Or I can run it whenever I want to do it. And here, when I run the control check, it is going to check all the 3 options: whether the control matches the policy, whether I have the right evidence, and whether the evidence is correct. There is an option to run individual checks as well. So here you see the result of this check. Okay, we have the evidence.
And George,
yes.
Quick question for you. If you're just running an examine and test on one control, we already saw with MJ and Paolo how quickly their tasks were compared to how they used to do it. I know you just went through an audit recently using Trustero and Trustero Intelligence for the first time, and I believe your previous audit you went through was what we like to call internally as doing it the old way of doing GRC. So
the traditional way.
Yeah, exactly. The traditional way that everyone's familiar with. How would the time, what's the time difference between these two?
It's not even comparable because essentially I run the entire audit here. There are many layers here because it's not just examining the controls and gathering the evidence, but also when you use AI, you can spread the load. In the traditional way, yes, they're control owners, but you have to work with those control owners. You have to talk to them. You have to tell them what they need to supply. It's not always the right thing. Whereas here, especially with the Trustero Intelligence, I can expose the system to the control owners. And you actually went through this thing. I mean, if you have a question, you go and ask the system, and the system gives you the answer. You don't come to the subject matter expert. So the actual human, the time of the human becomes much more valuable because the AI supplements this thing. So yeah, it is very quick, and you can run this. That's like a mini audit. You can run this audit on a continuous basis to make sure that your controls are working. Okay, so you can see what it is testing. So this is what a junior auditor is going to do, like see whether the control matches the policy, whether you have the evidence, and whether you have the correct evidence. And I'm going to focus only on the very last one, which is the operating effectiveness check. And this is a lot. So this goes into details. It explains what we tested, why we tested it, the reason why we came up with this answer. And also it gives reference to the specific documents that were examined to come up with this answer. And here we found something. So in other words, yes, we performed the test. It was within the time. Everything was good. But guess what? One of the systems was actually not tested. So that's how we found it. And we can look at the test evidence and so on and so forth. The bottom line here is that it's not just the evidence that it is there in the system, but also AI decomposes the evidence that you have. For example, in this case, it was a PDF document that had the result of the DR test, like who participated in that DR test, what are the procedures that they executed, all of those things. So the AI will decompose this document to see, were they the right people? Was it the right procedure? Did it fit within the required time? So it's way more than just looking at, yeah, I have a file here that is done. So this is the first control I wanted to show. The second one is slightly different. The second one is unique user ID. So this is part of the identity and access management category of controls. We just have to have a list of the users from the system, and then we validate certain things against that list. Again, this is now familiar. These are the different checks that the AI went through on that control, but we failed the operative effectiveness check. And we can scroll down. We can see again the reasoning. A side note, AI is very verbose because we specifically ask to provide reasoning. That is how we can make sure, Paolo was talking about the 95% effectiveness. That is how we can make sure that, yes, it looked at the right things, it thought the right way, and came up to the right conclusion. Again, this is not replacing a human. There must be a human in the chain. Okay, so if we look here, there are two evidence that failed. And let's look at the test table here. Okay, we were supposed to have 100% compliance with the control. Actually, we have only 92%. So let's look at the table and see where exactly is the problem. And, there it is. So there is an account here called support. That's a generic account, not good. And then that account doesn't have the MFA enabled. So that's why this control failed here. Okay. So that is how how we can use AI to do continuous control monitoring. And when we go back to the dashboard, we can see every time when there is a failure, we can start investigating that failure, fix the control, and move on. And again, not finding before and God forbid during the audit. Okay. So the next one I would like to show is how we use Trustero Intelligence. So the point I was making with the continuous control monitoring is that when we use AI, we kind of democratize something that was reserved for the few that can have resources to do it. Continuous control monitoring. Here, I'm going to talk about what Connor just mentioned, how we can use Trustero Intelligence for during the audit. Okay.
And how folks like me who are non-GRC but might have
no idea
my
what is
own
going
controls.
Yep.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I was a new control owner for our audit. No idea what to do. Trustero Intelligence really helped with that. So George, why don't you show the folks that are still on here 2 minutes after time to?
Oh, sorry for that. I'm going to be really quick.
We've got a lot of cool stuff to show, so don't worry about it. Everyone will get the recording.
So this is like we talked about ChatGPT earlier. This is ChatGPT for GRC. Okay, so I'm going to start with kind of a simple question that I know the answer, but let's say I have an auditor that asked me this question. Normally, the so-called traditional way, I have to figure out who performed the DR test and get the document, examine the document, and let me get back to you on the result. Whereas here, I just ask the question, and the system will look at the available evidence, the necessary controls, the match it does, and it's going to come up with the answer. And there you go. It tells me that this was performed on January 15th, and all the necessary information in terms of why we did it, what is the result, and all those details. Okay, so let's go to the next one. If I say, for example, just in the interest of time, I'm getting it ready instead of waiting. I can ask who participated in that audit. And then again, the system is going to find the document that describes the test and tells me all the people that participated in that test. So this is coming from the PDF of the test result. And then I decided to say, okay, Taylor, I noticed Taylor here and there. Does he own any other controls? No problem. Yep, Taylor owns some other controls. now Taylor rings a bell. Something's not right. Something is not right. So the next time, okay, what other controls does he own? Were there any issues with them? Oh, you know what? I just found out there is another problem. Taylor, who executed the DR test, his laptop actually doesn't have encryption enabled. So that is another failure of the control. So essentially, you can expose the TI, this chat GPT for GRC. You can expose Trustero TI to the internal GRC team that we can do this kind of investigation, this kind of analysis, but you can open it up outside of the GRC team. For example, you can give it to your legal team and they're working on a contract and there is a provision in the contract that they need to check that we can satisfy that provision. Go to the Trustero TI, ask the question whether we're doing that. Or you can even expose it to your internal audit. So instead of doing some elaborative walkthroughs with your most expensive resource, the engineers, they can go and ask questions here. Because don't forget, we already preloaded this with a lot of documents. It has your policies, it has your standards, it has your network diagrams, the evidence for the controls, all of those things. So essentially, you can query it and it knows everything about the environment.
And it told me, a brand new control owner, how I can actually operationalize my control and make sure that we're compliant with that control and I did my job right.
So
And
there is
that's what I
educational
love
value
about it.
here.
That's right. Thanks, George. All right, everybody, we're 6 minutes over time. Thank you very much for sticking around with us.